I never expected to be the one to unravel a family's darkest secret, especially not one of the wealthiest families in Boston. My name is Eleanor Mitchell, a 32-year-old legal assistant at Harrington and Ross, a prestigious law firm specializing in estate planning for New England's elite. I've always been the quiet type, the one who blends into the background, organizing documents and preparing meeting rooms. That changed on a rainy Tuesday in October. "Eleanor, I need the Henderson file ready by 3 p.m. in the Oak Room," Mr. Ross barked as he passed my desk, his Italian leather shoes squeaking against the marble floor. "Full confidentiality protocol, just you handling the paperwork." The Henderson estate was big news. Carlton Henderson, tech mogul and philanthropist, had passed away suddenly 3 weeks ago at 68. His funeral had made the local news, with politicians and celebrities in attendance. His will reading was scheduled for tomorrow, and bizarrely, at the family's request, it would be filmed for a documentary about his life and legacy. I nodded and headed to the file room. The Henderson box was massive, decades of amendments, trusts, and property transfers. As I carefully arranged the documents in chronological order, a yellowed envelope slipped from between 2 folders. It had no markings except for a simple CH, written in faded blue ink on the front. It wasn't labeled or cataloged like our firm's standard documents. My first instinct was to return it to the box unopened. Client confidentiality is sacred in our profession. But something felt off. The envelope was sealed with wax, unlike anything we'd use today. It looked personal, not legal. Against my better judgment, I slipped it into my pocket. That night in my small apartment in Somerville, the envelope sat on my kitchen table like a ticking bomb. Rain pelted against my windows as I sipped chamomile tea, staring at it. Professional ethics told me to bring it back unopened. Curiosity urged me to look inside. "Just a peek," I whispered to myself. "If it's nothing important, I'll reseal it and return it tomorrow." I carefully broke the wax seal and unfolded the letter inside. The handwriting was elegant, but hurried. "My dearest Marianne, the years have not dimmed my love for you or for our son. I have arranged for Thomas to receive what is rightfully his, though I cannot acknowledge him publicly while Elizabeth lives. The enclosed key opens the safe deposit box at First National. The trust documents inside will ensure his future. Forever yours, Carlton." My hands trembled. Carlton Henderson had another son, one not publicly acknowledged. The letter was dated 15 years ago. I quickly searched online for Thomas Henderson, but found nothing connecting him to Carlton. The Henderson family was well documented. Carlton and Elizabeth had 2 children, James, 40, and Victoria, 38. There was no Thomas. Sleep evaded me that night. By morning, I had convinced myself to hand the letter to Mr. Ross and let him decide what to do. But when I arrived at work, the office was buzzing with excitement. "The documentary crew is already setting up in the Oak Room," my colleague Priya told me. Apparently, some network executive decided to air the will reading live instead of just recording it. The Henderson family agreed, probably for the publicity. My stomach dropped. Live? Today? In 2 hours. Mr. Ross is freaking out, making sure everything is perfect. I clutched my bag containing the letter. If there really was an unacknowledged Henderson heir, he deserved to know before the will was read publicly. But how could I find him in 2 hours? The name Marianne was my only lead. I returned to my desk and discreetly searched our firm's database. Nothing under Marianne Henderson, but when I searched for any Marianne associated with Carlton's files, a single result appeared: Marianne Dawson, listed as a former executive assistant at Henderson Technologies from 1985-1990. I found her on social media, now Marianne Dawson Brooks, living in Cambridge. Her profile showed a middle-aged woman with a son named Thomas, who looked remarkably like Carlton, the same distinctive gray eyes and cleft chin. According to his profile, Thomas was 33 years old, which aligned with the timeline of when Marianne worked for Carlton. My heart raced. I had a decision to make, and quickly. Revealing the letter would likely cost me my job, and possibly my career. Staying silent would deny someone their birthright, and make me complicit in maintaining a lie. I picked up my phone, and messaged Thomas Dawson Brooks. This will sound strange, but I work at Harrington and Ross, and found a letter from Carlton Henderson to your mother. I believe you may be his son. The will reading is happening live in 2 hours. You deserve to be there. Then I waited, the minutes ticking by agonizingly slow, wondering if I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. 45 minutes later, my phone rang. An unknown number. "Is this Eleanor Mitchell?" A deep voice asked, tense with emotion. "Yes, this is she," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "This is Thomas Dawson Brooks. I got your message. What exactly are you saying?" I took a deep breath. "I found a letter from Carlton Henderson to your mother, Marianne. It was written about 15 years ago, and in it, he refers to you as his son. He mentions setting up a trust for you." There was a long silence. My mother always told me my father was someone she worked for who was married and couldn't acknowledge me. She never told me his name. His voice cracked slightly. "She passed away last year from cancer." My heart sank. "I'm so sorry for your loss." "Can I see this letter?" "Yes. The will reading is at 1 p.m. today at our office. It's being televised. Part of a documentary about Carlton Henderson." "Televised?" He sounded incredulous. "What kind of circus is this?" "It wasn't my decision," I said. "But if what this letter says is true, you should be there. I'll be there, in 30 minutes. I want to see that letter before I walk into anything." The next half hour was excruciating. I kept expecting Mr. Ross to call me into his office, to tell me the mysterious letter had been reported missing. But the office remained focused on preparing for the televised event. Camera crews adjusted lighting in the Oak Room while catering set up refreshments for the Henderson family. When reception called to say a Thomas Dawson Brooks was asking for me, I nearly jumped out of my skin. I met him in a small, unused conference room on the second floor. Thomas was tall, with dark hair graying slightly at the temples, a younger version of Carlton Henderson with softer features. He wore a weathered leather jacket and jeans, out of place in our marble and mahogany surroundings. His hands were calloused. I later learned he worked as a carpenter, restoring historic homes around Boston. "The letter?" he asked without preamble. I handed it to him with trembling fingers. He read it slowly, his expression unreadable. When he looked up, his eyes were shining. My mother kept a box of mementos. There were letters signed only with C, birthday cards for me with no name, just generous checks. I always wondered. He carefully folded the letter. "What happens now?" "The will reading starts in 40 minutes. You could attend, but I have no legal standing without proof," he finished. "Just this letter, which could be dismissed as fake." "There's more," I said. "The letter mentions a safe deposit box at First National with trust documents. The bank would never give me access without proof I'm the person named in the trust." I nodded, biting my lip. "Unless someone with legal authority accompanied you." Thomas stared at me. "Are you suggesting—" "I have authorization to retrieve documents related to Henderson estate matters." It wasn't exactly true. I had access to the firm's general account at First National for courier purposes, but nothing specific to the Henderson estate. What I was proposing wasn't just bending the rules, it was breaking them. "Why are you doing this?" Thomas asked, studying me carefully. "You could lose your job." It was a fair question. Why was I risking everything for a stranger? Maybe it was because of my own father, who had walked out when I was 7, leaving my mother and me with nothing. Or maybe it was simply that in my 10 years at Harrington and Ross, I'd seen too many powerful people manipulate the system while others suffered in silence. Because it's the right thing to do, I said finally. 20 minutes later, we were at First National Bank. My hands shook as I presented my firm ID and a document retrieval form I'd forged on office letterhead. The bank manager hesitated when I explained we needed access to a safe deposit box potentially connected to the Henderson estate. This is irregular, Ms. Mitchell. We would typically need specific authorization. The will reading is in less than an hour, I explained, forcing confidence into my voice. Mr. Ross needs all relevant documents immediately. The Henderson family is already at our office with a film crew. The name-dropping worked. The manager led us to the vault, where the key from the envelope-opened box, Therm 714. Inside was a manila envelope containing legal documents, a trust established for Thomas Dawson, son of Carlton Henderson and Mary Ann Dawson, with a value of $5 million, plus shares in Henderson Technologies worth considerably more today. Thomas stared at the papers, his hand shaking. He really was my father, and he wanted to provide for you, I said softly. We made copies of everything, and I convinced Thomas to let me hold on to the originals. Trust me, I said. There's a way to handle this that might work better for everyone. As we hurried back to the office, I explained my plan. It was risky and would likely end my career at Harrington and Ross. But if it worked, Thomas would get the recognition and inheritance he deserved. We slipped into the building through the service entrance and took the stairs to avoid being seen. The will reading was scheduled to begin in 10 minutes, and the Oak Room was already filled with family members, executives, and the documentary crew. Wait here, I told Thomas, leaving him in the small conference room. When the time is right, I'll come get you. I smoothed my skirt, took a deep breath, and walked into the Oak Room, carrying the original letter and trust documents hidden among the official will papers. Mr. Ross gave me a curt nod as I arranged the documents on the polished table. James and Victoria Henderson sat stiffly on one side, their mother Elizabeth, beside them, elegant in black. Network executives and documentary producers huddled near the cameras. Light technicians made final adjustments. We're live in 2 minutes, called the director. I caught Mr. Ross's eye and whispered, Sir, there's something important you need to see before we begin. He frowned, but followed me to a corner of the room. I handed him the letter and trust documents, watching as his face paled. Where did you find these? He demanded in a harsh whisper. In the Henderson files yesterday. I believe they're relevant to today's proceedings. This is impossible. The will has been finalized. These documents predate the current will by several years, sir. They establish a legal trust that exists independently. Mr. Ross's jaw clenched. Do the Hendersons know about this? I don't believe so. And the son? This Thomas? He's here. Mr. Ross closed his eyes briefly. I could see him calculating the legal and public relations implications. Opening them, he fixed me with a hard stare. If this is legitimate, it changes everything. If it's not, your career is over. He straightened his tie. Bring him in, quietly. I slipped out and returned with Thomas, who stood nervously at the back of the room as the cameras went live. Mr. Ross began the formal reading of the will, his voice steady despite the bombshell he knew was coming. The Standard will divided Carlton Henderson's estate between his wife and 2 children, with substantial charitable donations. When Mr. Ross finished, he cleared his throat. However, additional documents have just come to light that require immediate attention. It appears that Mr. Henderson established a separate trust 15 years ago for a son not previously acknowledged in public records. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Elizabeth Henderson's face went completely white. Victoria gasped audibly, while James jumped to his feet. "This is preposterous," he shouted. "Some con artist trying to steal from our family." "The documentation appears legitimate," Mr. Ross continued calmly, though I could see a vein pulsing in his temple. including a letter in Carlton Henderson's handwriting and legally executed trust documents. All eyes turned to Thomas as Mr. Ross gestured for him to step forward. Cameras swiveled to capture his face, which bore an unmistakable resemblance to the man whose portrait hung above the fireplace. "This is Thomas Dawson Brooks," Mr. Ross announced. "According to these documents, the son of Carlton Henderson and Marianne Dawson." The live broadcast had just become a sensation that would dominate news cycles for weeks to come, and I, Eleanor Mitchell, the invisible legal assistant, had set it all in motion. The aftermath was immediate and overwhelming. The network cut the live feed, but not before millions of viewers had witnessed the revelation. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications as the story exploded across social media and news outlets. Henderson Air was trending within the hour. Mr. Ross ushered the Henderson family, Thomas and key firm partners into a private conference room, away from the cameras. I wasn't invited, but I could hear Elizabeth Henderson's voice rising in angry disbelief through the door. Victoria sobbed loudly, while James demanded DNA tests and threatened lawsuits. I sat at my desk, alternating between panic and a strange sense of calm. My career was almost certainly over, but I couldn't bring myself to regret what I'd done. Thomas deserved to know the truth about his father, and Carlton Henderson had clearly wanted to provide for him, even if he hadn't found the courage to acknowledge him publicly during his lifetime. Around 5 p.m., Mr. Ross's assistant summoned me to his office. He sat behind his massive desk, looking exhausted, his normally immaculate silver hair slightly disheveled. "Ms. Mitchell," he began, his voice dangerously quiet. "In 27 years of legal practice, I have never encountered such a flagrant violation of protocol and client confidentiality." I straightened my spine. "I understand, sir." Do you? Do you understand that you may have exposed this firm to significant liability? That you accessed confidential documents without authorization and disclosed their contents without consulting partners? That you brought an unverified individual into a private will, reading that was being broadcast nationally? Yes, sir. And yet you did it anyway. He studied me for a long moment. Why? Because Carlton Henderson wanted his son to be provided for, I said simply. The letter and trust make that clear. Thomas deserved to know, and the family deserved to hear it from professionals rather than discover it some other way. Mr. Ross sighed deeply. The DNA test results came back while you were waiting. Rush job, called in some favors at the lab. Thomas Dawson Brooks is unquestionably Carlton Henderson's biological son. Relief washed over me. Then the trust is valid. Yes. And Elizabeth Henderson has reluctantly agreed not to contest it, given the irrefutable evidence and Carlton's clear intention to provide for Thomas. She's more concerned with controlling the narrative at this point. He leaned forward. Which brings us to you. Here it comes, I thought. The termination. The Henderson family has demanded your dismissal, Mr. Ross continued. And under normal circumstances, I would comply without hesitation. However, he paused, a strange expression crossing his face. Carlton Henderson was my client and friend for 30 years. He confided in me about many things, but never about Thomas. I believe he wanted to tell me. There were moments when he seemed on the verge, but he never found the courage. Mr. Ross stood and walked to the window. Carlton was brilliant in business but a coward in his personal life. He loved Marianne Dawson. I suspected as much years ago, but he wasn't willing to risk his marriage and public standing for her. Instead, he set up the trust and hoped it would be enough. He turned back to me. What you did was professionally unethical, but morally right. Carlton would have thanked you, I think, for forcing the truth into the open. I hardly dared breathe. Does that mean you're suspended without pay for 2 weeks while we conduct a full review of your actions? After that, we'll reassess your position. His expression hardened. But make no mistake, Ms. Mitchell. If you ever again take matters into your own hands regarding client affairs, your termination will be immediate and permanent." "I understand. Thank you, Mr. Ross." As I gathered my things to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Can we meet? Coffee shop across the street in 15 min?" I found him at a corner table, looking shell-shocked, but somehow lighter than when I'd first met him that morning. "How are you holding up?" I asked, sliding into the chair opposite him. "Still processing." He pushed a cup of coffee toward me. "They're acknowledging me, publicly. There's going to be a press release tomorrow." "That's good, right?" "It's surreal." Thomas ran a hand through his hair. "My whole life, I wondered about my father. My mother would only say he was someone important, who couldn't be part of our lives. On her deathbed, she almost told me his name, but she couldn't bring herself to say it." He met my eyes. "And now I find out he was Carlton Henderson. My work crew is going to lose their minds." I smiled despite myself. "What happens next with the family?" "Elizabeth, my father's widow. She's not exactly welcoming, but she's practical. James is furious, convinced I engineered this whole thing. Victoria actually seems curious about me, asked to see pictures of my mother." He shook his head in disbelief. "They want me to attend a family dinner next week. For closure," they said. "Will you go?" "I think so. Not for the money. I've managed fine without it for 33 years. But to understand who he was, who I am." He studied me across the table. "What about you? Are you fired?" "Suspended for now. Future uncertain." Thomas winced. "I'm sorry. You risked everything for a stranger." "Don't be sorry. I'd do it again." "Why?" I considered the question carefully. When I first started working at Harrington and Ross, I believed in the law as this perfect system where everyone gets what they deserve. 10 years later, I've seen how power and money bend the rules. Your father had the means to acknowledge you properly in his lifetime, but he chose the easier path. When I found that letter, I saw a chance to set something right. Thomas nodded slowly. "Well, whatever happens with your job, I owe you. The trust is being processed next week. $5 million plus stock. It's a lot more money than I ever expected to see." He hesitated. "Let me help you if things go sideways at the firm." "That's not why I did it." "I know. That's why I'm offering." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two strangers connected by an extraordinary day. "The media is going crazy," Thomas said eventually. "I've had 17 interview requests already." "Are you going to talk to them?" "Eventually. But first, I want to learn about my father from people who actually knew him. Not just the public figure, but the man." He smiled slightly. "The irony is I've actually worked on 3 different Henderson properties over the years. Restored the woodwork in James's vacation home in Nantucket last summer. Walked right past family photos of my father without knowing." My phone buzzed again. A news alert about the Henderson air scandal. Thomas noticed and grimaced. 15 minutes of fame, right? Except I never wanted it." "It'll die down," I assured him, though I wasn't entirely convinced. The combination of wealth, secrecy, and live television made for an irresistible story. As we parted ways outside the coffee shop, Thomas surprised me with a quick hug. "Thank you, Eleanor. Not just for finding the letter, but for believing I deserved to know." I watched him walk away. This man whose life had transformed in a single day because of a yellowed envelope and my decision to open it. Whatever happened next, whether I kept my job or lost it, whether the story blew over or followed us for years, I knew I had done the right thing. 3 weeks later, I returned to Harrington and Ross after my suspension. The Henderson scandal had faded from headlines, replaced by newer controversies. Thomas had given exactly one interview, declining to criticize his father and expressing only a wish to connect with his half-siblings. DNA tests had conclusively proven his paternity, and the trust had been officially transferred to his name. To my surprise, I wasn't relegated to file room duty or treated as a pariah. Instead, Mr. Ross called me into his office my first day. "Back. The partners have reviewed your actions," he said without preamble. "While we cannot condone your methods, we recognize your commitment to client interests, albeit interpreted rather liberally." I waited, hardly daring to hope. "We're establishing a new division focusing on estate reconciliation and complex family transitions. Given your unique perspective, we think you would be valuable to this team. With appropriate supervision, of course, it wasn't quite forgiveness, but it was a second chance, and sometimes that's enough. As for Thomas, we still meet for coffee occasionally. He's established a scholarship fund in his mother's name using part of his inheritance. He and Victoria have developed a cautious friendship, while James remains, distant but civil. Elizabeth Henderson has retreated to their summer home in Martha's Vineyard, away from lingering public interest. The letter that started it all sits in a safety deposit box, my own this time. A reminder that secrets rarely stay buried forever, and that sometimes uncovering the truth is worth the risk. I'm no longer the invisible assistant blending into the background. I'm Eleanor Mitchell, the woman who uncovered a hidden letter in a will reading room and unleashed a scandal on live TV. But more importantly, I'm someone who helped a man discover his true identity and claim his rightful place in the world. And for that, I have no regrets.